We're heading into the middle of the Atlantic now because we're going to look at one of the most famous shipwrecks of all time, the focus of all those documentaries and Hollywood movies.
The Titanic has been explored for decades, but not all things are what they seem. A stunning new discovery has just been made, and to put it mildly, it's a game changer. We're talking about a revelation so significant that it makes the official inquiry look like a fairy tale. Using technology that basically brought the ghost of the ship back to life, scientists found something deep within the wreckage at 3,800 meters. You won't believe what it reveals about the ship's final moments, the crew's last stand, or the real reason it went down so fast. A new view of an old tragedy. The mission began as a partnership between deep-sea mapping company Magellan Limited and Atlantic Productions. Their goal was audacious: create a complete one-to-one digital twin of the entire wreck site, not just for show, but to answer the mysteries that generations of divers and historians had only guessed at. They deployed a small fleet of robotic submersibles, which spent over 200 hours crisscrossing the site in a methodical grid for weeks. They took over 700,000 high-resolution photos from every possible angle and collected 16 terabytes of visual data. This was not just a scan. It was, in the words of one engineer, a resurrection, a way to time travel back to the very night the Titanic vanished. As the first renderings came to light, even the most hardened experts were stunned.
The Titanic was simply colossal, and this 3D scan reveals the wreck in its entirety. For the first time, we have an exact digital copy of the real thing.
The bow, still stately and upright, pointed toward the New York it never reached. Railings were bent, portholes gaped open, and anchor chains lay coiled as if waiting for orders. But travel just 2,000 feet away, and you meet the stern, a mangled skeleton of collapsed decks with boilers and engines torn out and flung across the ocean floor. Between the two, a corridor of 5,000 artifacts formed an unmistakable debris trail, like breadcrumbs marking Titanic's final agony. Many people are crazy about seeing these artifacts. For the first time, you can zoom in on a single rivet, see a child's shoe half buried in the silt, or read the faded logo on a champagne bottle. More than that, you can trace exactly where each piece landed, giving experts a forensic timeline of the disaster in ways never before possible. The digital model is so precise that you can count the teeth on a gear or spot a scorch mark on wiring, and it instantly debunked some of the oldest myths. One of the biggest revelations? The ship's breakup was not the clean, dramatic, one-second snap shown in movies. The scan shows a brutal, drawn-out sequence. You can see how steel beams twisted like taffy, decks folded in on themselves, and massive machinery was hurled hundreds of feet as the stern rotated violently during its descent. The bow, by contrast, buried itself gracefully in the mud, as if still reaching for the surface.
The Titanic has offered an unprecedented insight into the ship's final moments. A detailed three-dimensional reconstruction of the wreck reveals engineers worked to keep the lights on even as the vessel sank.
What many overlooked is that this explains why the two halves look so different and why personal belongings from the grandest state-wrote rooms ended up in the same resting place as a coal trimmer's shovel. It wasn't a snap, it was a violent, shredding tear. With each pass of the submersibles, new details came into focus. There were rooms never seen by cameras before, corridors where melted wiring still clung to the walls, and collapsed bunks with luggage tangled in a net of debris. The precision of this technology allowed researchers to reconstruct where crew and passengers must have stood, what they clung to in their final moments, and how quickly the chaos unfolded. But as extraordinary as these visuals are, a closer look at the engine rooms would reveal the most shocking story of all: the keepers of the light. In every retelling of the Titanic's tragic story, the focus has always been above decks. We picture frantic passengers dashing for lifeboats and the band bravely playing as the Atlantic claims the ship. But what really happened deep below, in the belly of the ship where the heartbeat of the Titanic pulsed with fire and steam? Until recently, much of that story was left to pure speculation. Now, with the revolutionary three-dimensional scan, those shadows have lifted. And what has emerged is a story of almost unimaginable grit and sacrifice that changes how we see the entire event. The Titanic was not just a luxury liner, it was a floating power plant. It was driven by 29 boilers, over 150 furnaces, and some of the largest steam engines ever built. The engineering spaces were a sprawling, dangerous maze even in calm waters. For the stokers, trimmers, and engineers working below, life was already a punishing cycle of 12-hour shifts surrounded by blistering heat and bone-rattling noise. Yet in those last hours, they faced a challenge no one could have prepared for. The new scan brought the lower decks into focus with an intimacy that was impossible before. Forensic investigators found the metal grates in boiler room number 5 buckled inward, evidence that the heat and pressure did not drop even as freezing water breached the compartment. Experts say the only way this could have happened is if the men on duty continued to stoke the fires and manage the boilers long after others had fled. These men were the keepers of Titanic's life force, and their refusal to abandon their posts gave hundreds of people above them a fighting chance. Think about what that meant. Every extra minute the lights stayed on, and every moment the pumps fought the relentless flow of icy Atlantic water, another lifeboat could be launched.
What makes this different is a true digital twin of the Titanic. The resolution is phenomenal.
Without those men, the order on Titanic's decks would have collapsed into blind panic in total darkness. The details emerging from the scan paint an almost cinematic portrait. The mangled stern section yielded a clue no previous expedition had ever spotted. A manual steam valve locked in the open position, hidden among twisted pipes. This valve was the lifeline feeding steam to the ship's dynamos, which powered the electrical system. Survivor after survivor remembered the electric bulbs burning brightly against the black night, flickering but refusing to go out until the very end. The thing is, skeptics used to dismiss this as an exaggeration. Now, we have proof. The men in the engine rooms made a conscious choice to keep the generators running, buying time not for themselves but for strangers. Forensic electrical engineers poring over the digital model found something else chilling: scorched wiring and corroded junction boxes showing a pattern of overload. The engineers had deliberately rerouted current through backup circuits, keeping the ship's power grid alive as long as they could. Some of these wires were fused by heat, evidence that someone took the time, even as water rose to their knees, to maintain the delicate balance of power and light. If the men had abandoned their posts even 15 minutes earlier, Titanic's decks would have been plunged into pitch-black chaos. Their names were seldom mentioned in the headlines, but the 2025 scan is changing that narrative forever. Their heroism bought precious time, but what was happening to the ship's structure during that time? How the Titanic really broke. As Titanic's engineers made their last stand below, a different kind of battle was playing out above: the relentless physics of cold iron, rising water, and raw Atlantic force. For a century, we've seen the dramatic images of the ship splitting in two, but what the new scan actually revealed is far more terrifying. For the first time, it gives us a frame-by-frame forensic replay of the ship's destruction, one that upends decades of speculation. It all begins with what many overlooked for years. It was thought the iceberg gouged a massive 300-foot hole in Titanic's hull. The truth, laid out by the digital model with scientific precision, is almost more chilling. The damage consisted of 6 long, razor-thin slits stretching along the starboard side. Imagine a series of surgical cuts, letting the North Atlantic seep in, one compartment at a time. This is not a story of a single catastrophic breach, but of death by 1,000 cuts, a ship that bled out in slow motion. The scan lets us see what that water did to the steel. As compartments flooded, Titanic's bow settled deeper, pulling the stern upward at a sharper and sharper angle. The ship was designed to survive 4 flooded compartments. The iceberg compromised 6. That razor-thin margin sealed its fate. Survivors in the last lifeboat spoke of a sound like a great groaning roar. They were hearing the ship's spine snap, a sequence the scan shows was neither quick nor clean. Instead, the digital model reveals a slow, violent unraveling. At the very core of the wreck, investigators traced a pattern of torsional stress, a spiral of metal fatigue that coiled up through the ship's backbone. Deck by deck, the scan documents beams warping and deck plates folding like origami. The wreck site preserves this moment perfectly. The bow is embedded deep in the silt, almost a full deck's height below the seafloor, as if it tried to keep going. The stern, in contrast, is a mangled, collapsed heap, its decks pancaked into a jumbled ruin. The scan doesn't just tell a story of destruction, but of timing. By analyzing the position of debris, marine archaeologists can now reconstruct the path of the breakup. As the stern twisted free, entire sections of the midship collapsed, trapping everything and everyone still inside. The collapse was so powerful that it scattered fragments over a debris field nearly 2,000 feet wide. One of the scan's most haunting revelations is the rotation of the stern. As the bow plunged, air pockets turned the stern into a spinning, collapsing shell. It didn't just fall, it twisted violently and then crashed down, flattening everything inside. Debris from this collapse was hurled outward, creating a trail that is now mapped in stunning detail for the first time. The new evidence finally vindicates the handful of survivor accounts that had long been dismissed, from witnesses who swore they saw the ship break apart before sinking. The thing is, they were right all along. The ship was torn apart. But did the scan reveal any final human stories from within the chaos? A story finally told. As the digital scan swept over Titanic's remains, it revealed more than just twisted steel. Each discovery felt like a whisper from the past, a secret the Atlantic had hidden for over a century. The focus shifted from how the ship fell apart to the final human moments encoded in the wreckage. In the reconstructed Marconi radio room, teams could pinpoint the exact spot where wireless operators Jack Phillips and Harold Bride sent desperate calls for help until the power finally failed. The digital model shows the burnt relay boxes and fried fuses that correspond with their last fading signals. History was no longer guesswork, the evidence was right there. But what many people are crazy about is a discovery made near the officers' quarters, a battered metal locker. Inside, a remotely operated arm recovered a tin box. Within that box, preserved by a fluke of chemistry and pressure, was a single fragile scrap of paper. Researchers believe it's a log entry hastily scribbled as the ship listed. The faint writing notes that the lights were dimming, the bow was gone, and that men were still at their posts below. Even in the final moments, duty came before escape. The scan could even pick up the deep impression of the pencil on the paper, making it feel as if you were standing right there with them. Not every mystery was answered, but many myths were put to rest. There was no sign of a mysterious fire weakening the hull or hidden cargo, only the clear marks of mechanical failure meeting nature's awesome power. So you might be wondering, if all this happened so long ago, does this new information really matter? The thing is, for the families of the 1,500 souls who were lost, and for the historians dedicated to the truth, these details are everything. They transform a distant legend into a raw human story. This wasn't just a ship, it was a collection of lives, dreams, and last words scattered across the seabed. For the viewers watching this, wondering if this is all true, the answer is that the evidence is now clearer than ever. We aren't missing a key detail anymore, we are seeing the whole picture for the first time. This incredible discovery has answered so many questions, but it also opens up a new one. If we were this wrong about the Titanic for a century, what other parts of our history are just waiting to be corrected? Let us know your thoughts below, and don't forget to like and subscribe.